it kind of?
Oh yeah, we do definitely we'll do an
Okay.
introduction.
So you want to do one first? You said.
Yeah, I'll do odds. You do evens.
Okay.
Little structure. Oh, we're live.
Ooh, are we live?
Yes. We're just waiting for the link.
All right, let me put in that link really quick.
Let's see. So we'll usually probably give it. We'll wait for some people to trickle in. Probably first 10, maybe 15 minutes, and then I think once around that time we'll just give we'll actually start. But we can see who's coming in. We kind of do a little roll call.
Sure.
And they can throw in comments and just fool around.
Yeah, I'll have to figure out I'll have to learn how to do the live YouTube with the Zoom, because that might be an answer to some questions that folks are asking me, and I'm going,
oh yeah.
I don't know. Because now that we have an online presence, nobody wants to stop that, but nobody knows how to make it go forward either. So they ask me, and I'm like, yeah, right. Let me call Wendy. I call Wendy Lynn and go, can I have my 5 minutes?
So right now we've got Caitlin Hollinsworth.
Yeah, Caitlin.
Hi, Caitlin. Once you guys log in, and why don't you write something in the chat so we know who's in and who's not? So we know who's in. Yes, bonus for Caitlin for being the first person in.
Now, can they access, is it the Zoom chat, or does it have to go through another channel somehow?
They go through the YouthTalks YouTube channel. Yeah. Okay. So they just go on YouTube and they can go to the channel and they see this live. Okay.
And then does Melanie have to relay the chat, or does it come automatically?
We have Rick and I have a separate window open of the chat or of the channel, so we can see what people say. Gotcha.
So I won't be able to see what they're saying.
You can if you want.
That YouTube link, you can.
Yeah.
let's not confuse me.
But we will relay the questions to you.
Sounds
it's
good.
Normally how we do it.
So right now, that just our audience of 6 right now.
Okay.
On watching the Zoom chat. So
they're watching me confess that I'm a technological Neanderthal.
Well, I think we all are at some point.
Well, I've gotten better. I used to be a troglodyte. Now I've come up a couple of notches.
Evolved a little bit.
I bulked up a little, yeah.
Okay, somebody left. Now there's 5. There used to be 6. Who did that?
Well, I think you, me, Mel,
Jackie,
Caitlin. I don't know who the 6th person was.
So that's 3 of us. Yeah. Okay. Oh, now someone's back in. Well, there's 4 of us, right? So 4 of us.
It might be Jackie again. He might be dual screening.
Have you ever had a Friday night when nobody showed up?
We have not.
No.
Well, then that's not going to happen. Either that or you scared them off when you told them who was going to be interviewed.
Well, we have at least one. So we're guaranteed. The streak is still alive.
Oh, Stop doing that. You're making me want to yawn.
Sorry,
Have some caffeine or something, would you?
I'm chugging coffee right now. Oh,
Make your own coffee?
yes. You drink coffee, right, Linda? I think I remember.
Yes, but I'm a decaf.
Yeah, I think I remember
Yeah.
that last time we grabbed coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, well, considering that I drink anywhere between 12 and 16 cups a day, I think I'm still getting a pretty good portion of caffeine.
Whoa.
I think that's like a regular cup of coffee.
I don't, when the doctor says, how much coffee do you drink? I almost always lie. It's not so bad now that it's decaf, but it's still a lot of coffee.
Do you remember when you first started drinking coffee?
Oh my gosh. I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old.
Whoa.
My grandma used to make coffee when I would go to her house, and it would be mostly milk or cream, but I started.
She would make coffee for you?
Well, she had coffee on all the time. She was Norwegian. She had a pot of coffee on the stove all the time. So when we had cookies and coffee, I had milk coffee basically, but apparently I learned to like it early on, because by the time I was in my early teens, I was a diehard coffee drinker.
Wow.
Are Norwegians famous for drinking coffee?
Yeah. And then I'm French on the other side, and they're pretty good coffee drinkers too. So, it was destined to happen that way.
Did your grandma make like coffee a certain way? In a particular way? Is there like a Norwegian style of coffee?
Not that I remember. The person whose coffee I remember is my grandma Bergeon on the other side of the family, my dad's mom, because she had a big old-fashioned pot that sat on top of a wood-burning stove, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
And she put the grounds in the top, and then she would put eggshells in there because it supposedly kept the bitterness of the coffee down. And so that's the coffee. That's the only coffee I ever remember how anybody made it from back when I was way younger.
I think there's I know people who I've heard of people doing that with like in Hong Kong for milk teas.
Ah, okay.
And that also like keeps it smooth and not as bitter apparently.
Yeah.
So
I've never tried it though.
Shells into the grinds or into the leaves or
yeah, the kind of coffee pot she had, the top was probably, this big. So the basket was pretty good size, and she'd put the grounds in first and then just put eggshells over the top.
Wow, interesting.
And then of course it all perked together, so it got mixed up eventually, but yeah.
That's so interesting.
It is, now now that coffee pot's probably a museum piece.
They're probably selling it on eBay for hundreds of dollars or something.
Might even show up in the antique store somewhere, who knows?
When did you stop drinking caffeinated coffee?
That was after cancer. When I was having chemotherapy, I reached a point where my stomach couldn't tolerate the caffeine at all. So I switched to decaffeinated. And since then, it's almost 10 years now, I've been pretty much decaffeinated. Once in a while, I still have a cup of regular just for the good old days, or when I'm really, really tired and have something I need to do, then I just half a cup of regular and I'm good to go. Sorry, my cat distracted me. She's over in the chair doing weird things. She's a strange cat.
What kind of cat do you have?
She's a tortoise shell, kind of a multicolored. If she was a dog, she'd be a mutt.
Got
She's
it.
nothing fancy. Just a plain old cat.
How old is she?
14.
Ooh.
I
Is that-
adopted her about 7 or 8 years ago, as she was an adult, obviously. So, yeah, 14.
She's done a lot of traveling, huh?
She has. She's moved with me 4 times. Let's see, Grinnell to Hudson to Alameda to First Chinese to Medford. Oh my God, to Medford to Castro. 6 times she's moved with me. Wow. Doesn't seem possible.
Do you think she knows? Do you think she knows when she's?
I don't know. I wonder that sometimes, because all I have to do is put the carrier on the floor and she hides. I put it out a couple of days ahead of time because eventually she gets curious and goes and checks it out. But yeah, the first time she sees it, she runs and hides because it means we're either going to the vet or we're traveling. And she doesn't like doing either one of those. Unlike my previous cat, though, at least she doesn't cry the whole time in the car. I used to have to drug my other cat because she would cry the whole way. 1,900 miles. So, yeah, cat drugs are good sometimes.
Put them to sleep.
Oh.
Still waiting for a couple people to show up.
About how many do you typically have?
The past couple of times, we've been about hovering around the 20 mark.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a nice size group to have for interaction.
Yeah.
So is there any talk about when you all might transition into regathering at the church?
There are talks, but very, very preliminary.
Okay.
Yeah, everything is still, contingent on, how the, the guidelines and what phase we're on and stuff like that. So I know the our pastors are talking about it and they want, I think there's a poll out or survey out for us to respond to kind of gauge what people are feeling, so they can make the best decisions. So yeah. How about you guys?
That's kind of where we are too. And we have a pretty big challenge because the building is so small. Our sanctuary probably only seats about 75 or 80 at the most. So social distancing is like, oh, we could get maybe 15 people in there, with the 6 foot, because you need 10 square feet per person. So you start figuring that out and it's like, we'd have to have people in the kitchen and out behind the building and maybe in the parking lot, So it's an interesting challenge in the midst of all of this. So we might end up actually not regathering until things really settle down, because a third of our congregation is 70 plus. And then we have another probably 10 to 15% that are in that 55 to 70. then another third is families with young children. And there's no way we don't have big enough classrooms to do any kind of social distancing for Sunday school classes or anything like that. So it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's difficult for everyone, and we have a couple of additional challenges to address.
Mm.
So we shall see. We might end up doing, maybe we'll have in-house gatherings for 15 people or less and still do the online for others.
Oh,
See how that goes. At this point, we're kind of in those preliminary conversations as well. The pastoral staff and I have talked about it, but beyond that, not a whole lot. So I have that conversation coming up next week with the council.
what's the council? Is that like a deacon?
Like the deacon board, they just call it a council instead of deacons. Every church has their own, some of them call them elders, some of them are deacons,
Right.
some of them it's a council.
How does the council get selected? Is it
Just like the deacons, there's a nominating committee that nominates them and then they get voted on, and
I see.
pretty regular, normal kind of church stuff.
Not that dramatic.
Right. Nothing real different from anywhere else.
All right, well, if you're joining us, we're here with Pastor Linda, and we're just kind of waiting for a little bit, maybe another few minutes, 2 minutes or so, and then we'll get started with the interview. So hold on tight if you're with us. If you're new and just came in, tell us, write or say your name on the chat so we know who's here, so we can say hi to you. Have you kept in touch with anyone from SCBC?
Wendy and I have lunch. Well, we used to have lunch about once a month.
Oh,
Wendy Lynn.
Mhm.
Yeah, we got to be pretty good friends working together, and she does occasionally still help me out with my technology. So when I was working there early on, we set up a routine that I could have 5 minutes a day of technology help, whatever I needed technology wise. And it eventually it turned into kind of a running joke. And even I called her one time or emailed her from Medford one time and said, "Can I have my 5 minutes?" And she knew immediately what I was talking about, and she was able to help me. So we've kept in touch pretty much the whole time.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And I've met with Pastor Sebastian has asked to meet with me a couple of times just to check in about things that happened during the interim, get my perspective on something.
Right.
I'm pretty careful about that because it just, I don't know, I'm a little uncomfortable with trying to describe what happened 2 years ago. Things have changed a little bit, since then.
I'm sure.
So, and who I see, once in a while I see Wendy Kwan. I've run into her actually at a couple of conferences.
Really?
Global Leadership Summit. I ran into Becky and Wendy.
Where which site was it? The
The one over here in the East Bay.
I don't think I know that one.
I can't remember what city it was in. I want to say maybe, does Bonita sound right?
that's a Bay City, I think. Benitez or
Bonita? Yeah, I don't remember because I actually drove down from Medford last year for it. No, wait a minute. I was in Medford. I don't remember. I forget where I was on what year. No, I was here in Castro Valley this last one, right? No, I couldn't have been. I saw them somewhere.
How many global GLS
I've
have you
done
gone to?
this, let's see, last year would have been my 4th,
Hmm.
because I went both years. Yeah, twice. Yeah, I think it was my 4th, 3rd or 4th. And
Nice.
I don't know about this year because of everything else that's been going on.
Right.
I've been taking some classes that are covering some of the kinds of things that they're going to be talking about this year. So I don't know. I'll see how I feel in August.
All right. Well, if I know that a few people have joined us on the YouTube channel. So if you're just joining us, we're here with Pastor Linda. We're just kind of waiting, but I think we're gonna get started soon. Maybe now. Hi, welcome, Linda, Pastor Linda,
Nice to
to
be here.
our
You can
YouthTalks
call me
interview.
Linda. It's okay.
I'm so used to it, and
I know.
I'm just doing it. For those of us, or for those of you guys who don't know or don't, who maybe have not met Linda, or maybe like you recognize her, but you didn't really get to know her too well. Pastor Linda used to be our interim senior pastor at SCBC from what year was it?
Oh, gee, put me on the spot. Why don't you? I was there for
Good. I was just trying to see if you could like save me because I don't remember the
2
years.
years. I was there for 2 years and like 3 months.
2 years
So
and 3 months.
2016.
15, 16, 17, 16, 17, 18,
Um,
17, 18, 19.
so yeah, she was our senior pastor when Pastor Don retired. Most of you guys probably remember Pastor Don, or you've seen him. So he retired. He was our senior pastor for the longest time. I just actually, like, when he retired, I should realize, like, he started. I believe he started his. He became senior pastor when I started actually going to SBC. I don't know. That was a trip to me. Just like, oh, kind of like I was there for the very beginning. So yeah, during that time when we were looking for a senior pastor, we got a interim pastor, which is kind of like a substitute pastor.
Fill in.
She's the cool substitute teacher.
Yeah, there you go.
Helped lead our church during that time when we were looking to fill that vacancy, which is now filled by the amazing Reverend Sebastian Ong. But yeah, so we're just kind of catching up with Pastor Linda. We've made a lot of, I know during her time here, we've gotten to know her, built a lot of relationships were built, and yeah, we're just kind of seeing how you're doing, and we want to hear about what's new, how you've been dealing with this quarantine life, and all the different things that you've been learning. So can I ask you, start off with a question, and it is, what have you been up to lately?
What have I been up to lately?
Yeah, tell the people what you've been up to, for those who have not been keeping up.
Other than staying home, right?
Other than that, of course.
Yeah. The shelter in place for me hasn't been quite as constricting as for other people, because pastors are actually considered essential.
Yes, they
And
are.
so I can go out and make calls on people with, appropriate, I call them front porch calls, because I ring the bell, stand back, and then we talk across the porch. But because of that, I'm able to go out more than a lot of people. I do work at home the majority of the time for coordinating worship, writing sermons, taking care of the emails that come in every day endlessly, and working with a pastoral team. So I also live in a very quiet neighborhood, so I can get out and walk regularly during the day. So I've been somewhat restricted, but not as much as a lot of other people. So been a little bit easier in some ways.
For those people who don't know, where are you at right now? Like which,
Oh,
what are
okay.
you up to? Or
I'm
where are
in
you living?
I'm in Castro Valley, California, the Bay Area. I live in a little cul-de-sac off of a kind of a, not even a main street. It's a very quiet neighborhood. It's really kind of nice. It's tucked back. You'd never know that you're surrounded by freeways here. I mean, I could be just about anywhere in the Bay Area in 30 to 45 minutes most days. So it's really a kind of a nice little pocket of almost small town feeling sometimes.
Do you like that more, or do you prefer the big city?
I don't know. They both, there were things about living in San Francisco that I really loved.
Like what?
I love the diversity of the neighborhoods. I could walk everywhere I wanted to go. I could hop on a bus. I could hop on a train. I could, I mean, I parked my car and I'd take it out once a month just to make sure it was still working.
You were walking to church, right?
Oh yeah, I walked back and forth to church. I did take the car 1 week a day or 1 day a week because I would go out and see people. And it was easier to do that than, walk back home and get the car. But yeah, and if it was raining, I took a bus. I didn't have to worry about parking that way, and it just was a lot easier. Medford, it was weird. When I was up in Medford, I could park anywhere at any time of the day or night, and it was like, what's wrong, Where are all the people?
So you're at, what church are you at right now?
New Life Christian Fellowship.
You're at New Life Christian
Small
Fellowship.
American Baptist Church here in Castro Valley. I believe our membership right now is right around 80, 83, something like that.
And how long have you been with New Life?
I've been there since July of this year.
What were you doing prior to that?
I was in Medford, Oregon for almost a year and a half.
And that was the church right after SCBC, right?
Correct. So I went from exceptionally diverse San Francisco to monocultural Medford, Oregon, and suffered culture shock like you wouldn't believe. Between living urban and going to like a small town, going from way diverse to no diverse, it was strange. Yeah.
How big was the church in Medford?
Medford was about 125, give or take a little, on any given Sunday, 90-ish. So not a huge church, but not a real small one either. So kind of a typical American Baptist church, around 100 people.
So what's the, could you talk about like the journey and the process that God has led you to, one, like become an interim pastor, and then also that journey to FCBC and what that was like?
Let's see. I have to wind the clock back a ways. I was I'm trying to, let's see, what's the best order to say this in? I thought about this. So when I was in my mid-30s with 2 sons and recently divorced, I was working full-time as an executive secretary and had started attending a church where the youth pastor kind of took me under his wing to groom me to be a adult leader at some point. And I kind of took to it like a fish to water. It was the first time I'd had that kind of direct mentoring. The pastor of the church at the time, he and his wife also kind of started mentoring me. And eventually I realized through prayer and conversation with my mentors that God was asking me to do something different with my life than to be an executive secretary. And so I still can't believe I did this. I quit a full-time vested job with all the benefits and everything to go back to school at age 40. I had done no college, so I had to start from the beginning. And I went to Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota as a biblical, and well, actually I started as a their youth pastor track. And a year later realized that that wasn't exactly the right fit. And so I did biblical and theological studies. During that time, I was working as a temporary with an office personnel company.
Okay.
And I would go work in different offices as a temp for weeks or months or whatever they needed. And almost every job I went to, somebody would say to me, I don't know how you can do that, go to all these different places and work. And I would say, well, it's the same skill set. I just moved to a new desk and, I like meeting new people and going new places. And throughout that time, I was praying and talking to God about, what direction am I supposed to go? What should I be doing? While I was in college, I had first opportunity to do some international mission trips that took me to the Philippines and China. Tuck that little piece of information in the back of your head. That would have been in like 1997 or 8. And through a process of prayer and conversation with my mentors, I realized that God was calling me into ministry, pastoral type ministry. But I didn't think regular ministry, long term just didn't really appeal to me. And finally, I don't know, things just coalesced in a way that I thought, I heard about interim ministry. And I went, man, that sounds good. I like that idea. New people, new places. Sounds like fun to me. So I went off to seminary and sat down with the counselor and they asked me, well, do you have any idea what ministry God's calling you to? And I said, yep, I want to be an interim pastor. And the guy looked at me and said, on purpose? Apparently in the Baptist community, intentional interims were not at that time a position that was very done, I guess. I don't know.
I don't think I even knew about that position existed until you came. I was like, oh, there's a thing called intern pastor. So what is an intern pastor for those who are also unaware, like I was when before you came?
Okay, so historically, interim pastors would be pastors in the area that would fill a pulpit when a pastor retired or moved or whatever. Right. They would fill the pulpit and they would maybe do some sick calls. So it wasn't like a full-time pastor. They just did, a few things. Intentional interims, I did some additional training after I graduated from seminary. And we try to help churches utilize the energy that seems to exist in that interim time, that time in between. We help the congregations grieve the parting of the pastor, because whether you like the person or not, whether you agreed with them or not, whether you're relieved to see them go or sad, there is a grieving process that the congregation and the people go through. So, and it's a really good time to work through any kind of things that might be hanging around from the past. It's a good time to really do some kind of looking at the future and where are we going. So an intentional interim, which is what I do, is I step into the role of senior pastor with everything that brings with it. Mm-hmm. Just like pulpit supply and hospital calls. So that's kind of the short version.
Is there what does the when you go into that kind of shepherd that grieving situation or phase, what do you look for? What are you trying to what do you do?
Well, initially when I start at in a congregation, I spend probably 6 weeks to 2 months kind of almost like analyzing the system, mm-hmm. because there's a lot of things that you see very objectively when you first come in. But about 6 weeks later, you're starting actually to already get absorbed into the system, so it becomes more difficult. And in those early weeks, I can usually get a pretty good sense of how people are doing regarding the previous pastor. Is there this deep sense of loss, or is it more of a just kind of a transitional kind of loss? And depending on what I sense and how I hear people talking, I'll decide whether or not the grief is something that needs to be addressed, like very straightforward, almost like a grieving process, grieving workshop kind of deal, or it's kind of part of the ebb and flow and just needs to be referred to in more general ways. And a lot of the grieving work is done on an individual basis. You know, if somebody's really grieving the loss of the previous pastor, I'm probably meeting with them, just the two of us, one-on-one.
How many churches have you been an interim pastor at?
This is my 9th since 2006. So every year and a half to 2 years, I move.
And there's like what? There's like kind of, from what I have understood in our past conversations, there's like certain guidelines that you, like rules that you have as an interim pastor, because you can't operate as like fully, or like there's certain things that you have to do to be careful, right?
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about those?
Yep. There's a code of ethics that all American Baptist pastors agree. For an interim pastor like myself, there's an additional couple of things in that code of ethics. One of them being that we will not apply for the settled pastorate position. That my contract ends as soon as a pastor is called, and I will not throw my hat in the ring to become that pastor. The skills and gifts that an interim has differ in some ways to the skills and gifts of a settled pastor. And the expectations change. When you're an interim, you can get away with a lot more because, you know, if people don't like you, it's like, okay, I'll be gone. You know, you only have to put up with me for another year or so. It'll all be okay in the end. So I think I'm fortunate to have like a sense of freedom that maybe sometimes a settled pastor might not have.
Right.
Because people will put up with me because they know eventually I'm leaving. So, you know, I had one guy tell the pastor who came in behind me, there was one program that we had started while I was there, and it wasn't even me that started it. But the new pastor was told, well, oh, that was Linda's wild idea. You know, so I get blamed for all kinds of stuff after I'm gone. Anything that doesn't work, you know, blame it on her. I'm like, okay.
I think I think what you do is actually really amazing, and that's something that I was really struck by. Just your call to do that and your skill, and I think it takes a special person to be called into interim ministry. And I'm wondering, like, is that tough? Is it tough to leave communities that you might grow close to? And
good question.
Yes.
You.
Yes.
Emotionally.
Yeah, it's I go through my own grieving process in between. You know, I always take a couple of weeks off when I leave one church and before I start another, because I leave in a sense, I leave a piece of my heart behind with each congregation, some more so than others, but there's always that sense of loss, you know, when I move on, but it's mixed with a sense of joy for the congregation because they found a new pastor. So it's kind of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be hard.
Then I want to ask you, I know in our conversations when we like grabbed coffee, you've shared with me just your kind of I don't know, testimony, your life story, kind of your life before you became a pastor. And I remember it was just like I was totally floored with just that. You don't have to go into everything. But can you share some of that with some of the people who are tuned in right now? Just kind of like what was kind of the journey that God had you on, that kind of led you to become a pastor and where you're at now?
Well, that's when I think back, it's like when I was anywhere between 20 and 35 years old, if someone had said to me someday I'd be a pastor, I'd have laughed in their faces. I mean, that just kind of, So I grew up, one side of my family was Catholic, my dad's side, the other side was Lutheran, my mom's side. According to the Catholic side of the family, the Lutherans were going to hell because they were Lutheran. And according to the Lutheran side of the family, the Catholics are going to hell because they were Catholic. And apparently I have the kind of personality that says, well, if I'm going to go to hell, I'm going to have fun doing it. And that was kind of how I lived my life. If there was something to get into, I would find it, starting apparently from the stories I'm told at a very young age. I started, I would call it a love affair with alcohol when I was 12 or 13 years old. And within a few years, that was pretty much my life outside of school revolved around parties and drinking and all the things that went with that. I got myself into some situations that I can only assume that God was watching over me, because I probably should have died a couple of times because of harebrained stunts that we would pull or stupid things we would do. I mean, yeah.
I really want to like ask you what those things are, like, but then
I'll tell you one of the milder ones. Okay.
Okay. And then you could text me and email me the other ones.
Okay, this is something I still struggle with God.
Of course, this is none of this is we are condoning on this channel. We're just being honest and real.
Yeah. And there's a part of me that understands that everything that happened prior to my born again experience helped make me who I am. But when I look back on some of those behaviors, I'm embarrassed. I still deal with some shame around some of them. The drinking lifestyle led to a very promiscuous lifestyle. And so there were things that I was doing that when I look back, I think, oh my gosh. I thought nothing of mixing drugs and alcohol. So at that time, drugs of every kind were illegal. So thought nothing of breaking the law. I was drinking in the bars when I was like 18 years old, and the drinking age was 21, but we knew where to find the bars where they would serve us. So things like that. And, the line that went along with, mom and dad saying, where were you? And having some story to tell about where I was, that was not at all where I was. Friends who would lie for me, I would lie for them. I mean, yeah, it's like, I don't know. I sometimes wonder how I survived it all. And I guess I was considered what they call a high functioning alcoholic, because I never completely lost my job because of my drinking. It had an impact on it at times, but it was not a pretty lifestyle by any means. And when I finally sobered up in 1989, I was 27. And I had moved from northern Wisconsin to Minnesota. And part of the reason I moved was thinking that I could leave the drinking behind, that all those problems would stay behind and I would be able to start a new life without it. And within a year, the drinking caught up to me to the point where I ended up in AA. I found myself passed out. I went to a concert in the park and I woke up under a tree the next morning. No idea where my car was, no idea how I'd gotten there. And it was shortly after that that I started having conversations with my brother, who was having some issues around his drinking. He and his wife were having some problems, and his counselor told him that until he did something about his drinking problem, not to bother, don't come back. Counseling won't help. So my brother, who's a couple years younger than me, gets on the phone and he calls me up and he goes, Linda, you and I are an awful lot alike, and this is what I learned today. And he would do that like every day, week after week after week after week. And finally, I just went, all right, I'm going to go to AA and find out what that he's talking about, So I went to an AA meeting. I went, yeah, whatever. So they recommended that I talk to a counselor. So I did, because I'm going to show my brother that I don't have the same problems he does. And, because I'm the big sister. Well, long story short, however many years now later it is, thank you, Lord, I'm still sober. I never had a relapse, which is another miracle in my mind, because a lot of people do. And I think the way God uses that, or has used all of that, my favorite verse is in Jeremiah, Amos. God will restore the years that the locusts have eaten. And I remember when I hit the year when I had been sober a year longer than I had been drunk. And I remember that feeling of almost like being set free somehow. And all of those experiences, I think, have made me more empathetic about other people's struggles. I mean, I struggled with alcoholism. I smoked. I struggled with depression. I spent a number of years in and out of counseling to help deal with a lot of shame and guilt and things from those days. But it's given me empathy that I maybe wouldn't have had otherwise. And sometimes, a cynical edge is not a bad thing for a pastor to have, because we live in the world we live in. And yeah, so anything more about that you would like to know?
You said you had a born again experience.
Yeah.
What was that?
Let's see. I had been sober at that point probably, let's see, 6 or 7 years, I think. Anyway, I was living with a guy at the time. One of those things that I wish I hadn't been doing, but I was. Sobering up didn't improve all of my behavior all at one time. And he was watching Kenneth Copeland, TV evangelist, on Sunday mornings. And I would literally sit in the living room and make fun of him for it. How can you believe that stuff? And just, poke, made fun of him, made fun of Kenneth Copeland, made fun of the ministry, probably made fun of God, knowing me and how I was back then. But at some point, I started listening, I guess. And eventually, Kenneth Copeland, I don't know, maybe they still do. They used to do these crusades, and they would have these big, gatherings, kind of like the Billy Graham gatherings. And they were having one in Chicago. And for reasons I still don't completely understand, I decided I was going to go to that. And I was going to prove once and for all whether this God stuff was true, I guess is probably what it came down to. John, the guy I was living with at the time, he's like, yeah, that'd be cool. We can, Chicago would have been like an 8-hour drive. We could do that over, a weekend, come back, and so forth and so on.
Was this guy a Christian?
Not really. He was.
He was down to go to this.
He was on the edge of it. I mean,
okay.
At that time in life, okay, so like if this was Christian, he was here and I was there. You know, he was
Okay.
closer to the edges of Christianity than I was at the point.
Okay. Got it.
I knew the talk because I'd been brought up Catholic and Lutheran.
Right. All right.
Catholic Church, Lutheran Church, baptized, confirmed, you know, all that stuff. So I knew the talk, I knew the words, I knew but you know, yeah. So anyway, he bailed out at the last minute.
Oh,
And I was trying to figure out how I was going to do this, you know, drive to Chicago, go to this thing for 2 days and get back. I had to be to work, yada, yada, yada.
you're in Minnesota, or where are
I
you?
was in St. Paul, Minnesota then. Yeah. So, Chicago would have been.
So how far does drive? Like, yeah, how far is that drive?
3 hours. That would have been if I was a Rhinelander. So it was probably more like 10.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, John bailed out at the last minute, and I was really mad because I couldn't figure out how I was going to be able to do it by myself. And because I had been working on this big project at my job, Friday morning I went into work, worked for about an hour or so, and my boss said, you know, Linda, why don't you take the rest of the day off? You've been working really hard the last 6 to 8 weeks getting this thing together, and why don't you just go ahead and take the rest of the day off? And I went, I'm going to Chicago. So I went home, packed a bag, and left for Chicago. And while I was there, it's the weirdest thing. It's a whole nother story. All the things that happened that could have prevented my going were overcome somehow, including money, car breakdown, driving into like the worst neighborhood in the city in the middle of the night by myself. I mean, all these things that could have ended so badly. and yet there I was on Saturday night in this big auditorium with all these people who were like freaking out. I mean,
Right.
like, this is like, hallelujah, raise your hands, dancing in the aisles kind of stuff. And I'm like, Catholic, Lutheran, you know.
Is it free, or did you have to pay to get a ticket in?
I think it was free. I don't remember paying anything to go in. But it's long enough ago that I may have conveniently forgotten. But anyway, I'm listening to the speakers, and it was actually Kenneth Copeland's wife who was speaking on Saturday night. And I'm up in the balcony and I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. The music's good, you know, it's kind of fun to, you know, clap your hands in church and things like that. And I remember thinking, you know, if this God stuff is really true, then I want to know that my ankle, foot, knee, whatever it was physically that was bothering me, I want it healed. Then God can, that way I'll know God, you know, really exists.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could remember exactly what happened, but we were you know, she was talking, people were singing, they did an altar call, and people started going forward. And I thought, there's no way I'm going down the stairs and getting in line with all those goofy people who are doing this. And I'm sitting in my chair and I'm just kind of trying to figure out what to do. And I felt somebody touch my shoulder. And I turned around and looked, and there wasn't anybody there. And then I felt this warmth. I mean, I felt like something deep inside of me had been touched. And the tears were rolling down my face. And I don't know how I knew it was God. I don't know how I knew that was a Holy Spirit moment. I mean, even now, all these years later, it brings tears in my eyes to even think about it. And when I got home, I made the decision that I needed to get connected with the church. I needed to do some serious thinking about the lifestyle I was living. Now, I'd been sober for quite a while at this point. I need to make some changes in my life. So I got connected with the church. I moved out of the house and basically kind of started over again, which was for the, oh yeah, I skipped over the whole divorce thing, but never mind.
Yeah, I was like, I was like, that one's crazy.
Another, you know, it starts to sound like a soap opera after a while.
But it's so, it's real.
I know it is. Do you want me to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I want
I love
to,
it.
because it's so like it makes.
Okay.
I think it makes it so like that's your story, and it's like seeing how God moved in it. I think it's
Yeah.
just so powerful.
Okay, so I had been I had been sober about 3 years when I got married, and I was living in the in Minnesota in the Stillwater area, which is east of St. Paul, about 30 miles. Anyway, I had known Dan for 4 or 5 years before we got married, and thought that, you know, this is it. A year and a half and 3 or 4 months after our son was born, he informed me that he was gay and that he didn't want to be married anymore. Oh no, actually, he wanted to stay married, but he also wanted to be able to have these other relationships on the side. And I said no, using language that makes me blush now.
I love how like I just trying to imagine what you say, like it's just the image I see you now compared to like the stories that you tell me. It's like
Okay, my father once described my language as being language that would make a sailor blush. And apparently sailors use pretty foul language, and
so I hear.
Yeah, apparently mine ranked right up there with theirs. So, and it's interesting because that's one of the things that I worked on really hard when I first sobered up. And this was like pre any kind of born again experience or anything. But I made a commitment when I sobered up that I was going to clean up my language as well. So by the time I actually had my born again experience, the swearing had been reduced to an occasional, you know, damn or hell or shit, you know. And my sons informed me one time that when I said shoot, it sounded just like shit. So why didn't I just say it? Anyway, out of the mouths of babes, you know, they always help to clean up your life a little. So anyway, Eric was babe in arms when Dan and I divorced, and he got involved in another relationship and with a man. After we were divorced for a short time, a year maybe. And that man, about a year and a half, 2 years later, died of AIDS. And so I learned that I had to go in to be tested. Of course, there was a good possibility that Dan, my ex-husband, would have AIDS. And as it turned out, he did come down with symptoms, the precursor to AIDS. Mm-hmm. And eventually, now in between times, I had my born again experience. I started going to church. I now have a network of Christian friends. So I had a network of support that I would not have had otherwise by the time Dan became sick. Dan died in 2001 of complications of AIDS. And he and I had managed to maintain a friendly relationship. We had joint custody of our son, Eric. We lived within 6 or 8 blocks of each other, but on opposite sides of the highway. So Eric would stay a week with me and then a week with his dad. Dan got into a second relationship with a man named Kevin, and Kevin had an adopted son, Christopher, who soon became my second son because when Eric would come with me, Christopher often came. So anyway, boy, this gets convoluted, you guys. I told you, it's like a soap opera.
Amazing.
It's better.
So 2001, well, I learned about a year earlier that Dan was, I knew that he was, infected and having health issues. And he was physically, visibly going downhill. So Eric was like 19 when Dan died. And God had done a work in my heart that surprises me even to this day, because I got a call from my former mother-in-law when Dan entered his last days that they wanted me to come down to the house and be with the family because Dan was at home. And they told me, well, Marcy, she knew how to get me. She said, Eric needs you, Linda. Eric and Christopher need you. And I'm like, yeah, right. And I sat in my car and I said, God, I don't want to do this. I do not want to go there. I cannot do this. And in the way that only God can, and I don't know, again, I don't know if it was a voice, it was a feeling of what it was, but I knew I had to go. I had to go. If for no other reason, my son needed me, my boys needed me. So I got down to Dan's house and I got out of the car, and the first person out the door who threw himself in my arms was my ex-husband's partner, Kevin. And just sobbed. And I was there for the 4 days, the last 4 days of Dan's life, and with the family. And the thing is, out of that experience, I was in the room with the family the day Dan died. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God was there. I don't know what kind of conversation God and Dan may have had. I have no way of knowing that, but I know that God was there. And that kind of surety, that kind of knowing at a really deep gut level is what saved me when Eric and Chris came to me and said, do you think Dad went to hell? And I could say honestly, I don't know, but I don't think so, because God was there. God was there talking to your dad as he lay dying. And that experience was one of the most painful in my life, but it was also one of the most growing experiences I had. I had an opportunity to, I don't know, almost minister in a way to that family in a way I never could have otherwise.
Right.
And my mother-in-law, my former mother-in-law and I are still friends all these years later. When I go back to the Midwest to visit, I usually have dinner with Marcy at least once. I get invited to birthday parties and weddings, and I still have all these relationships. And that has given Eric and Christopher the freedom to have all those relationships. They never had to worry about, Mom doesn't want us with the Weigel family, or Mom doesn't like it, or she's going to be hurt. None of that existed with us. And so, yeah.
It's a pretty amazing story.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it.
You're welcome.
Well, maybe we shift a little gears, and I do want to ask.
Happy now?
Yes. I want to ask you. So during your time at SUBC, what sticks out to you? Kind of what when you think back on it, like what are the memorable times? What was encouraging when you came into FCC? I know, like, when you talk about the intern process and you're like, you're kind of looking at it objectively, like what what were your impressions? What stuck out to you, both in a positive way, and then maybe also what did you feel like were areas of like, oh, blind spots, or areas that you thought like, oh, that's something that needs a little more care? Obviously no church is perfect.
Yeah, let's make sure we all accept that ahead of time, is that no church is perfect and no person is perfect, including yours truly. When I first got to First Chinese, I mean, I knew about I knew there was a pastoral staff. I mean, I knew about Pastor Peter and Lydia and Diesel and that there were 3 congregations. And so I knew some of those basics, but until I got there and saw how it played out, I remember being a little surprised, shocked that it was young English and old English. I mean, I don't remember what the terms were being used, but
I think traditional and
contemporary.
No. Before those words, because when I first got there, it was the young English and I don't know if they used old English, but traditional. So when I found out that I was, specifically pastor to the older English congregation, I mean, that's okay, fine, no big deal. So anyway, I started out very early on realizing that this is like 3 separate congregations operating under one roof. Mm. And initially I couldn't see what held them together, because there seemed to be, I recognize differences in theologies, some theological differences. Worship style is not, I mean, that's minor stuff, but some of these more theological issues were pretty significant.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the early questions I kept asking the leadership is, are you in fact one church, or are you 3 congregations, 3 churches operating under one umbrella? And that was a question that was wrestled with the whole time I was there, and I think has probably continued, even though the dynamics have shifted somewhat. And I think the big question at First Chinese and in every church I've gone to is the big question that needs to be answered is, who has God called you to be? What are your core values and things like that? So those are some of the things we worked through. On the positive side, what I saw was that even though I couldn't see what it was that was holding these 3 congregations together, I realized soon that there was a lot of some of the cultural, some of it was cultural. We're all Chinese together here, some of that.
All right.
But there was a level of, I don't know, love, respect, something deeper that was holding the people together in spite of some of these differences. And Rick and Aaron, better than I that there had been some rocky roads along the way. And but there's something about the folks at First Chinese. When I left there, I said, you all have hit you've taken over a place in my heart like no other congregation I've ever served. I mean, one of the reasons I was excited about coming back to the Bay Area is because it's like, I can sneak over to First Chinese once in a while, It's been long enough now. Pastor Sebastian won't mind.
Should be safe, yeah.
I can come and say hi. So there's a level of willingness to work together and to really look at some of the hard stuff that I admired. And it's hard to put into words when it's an essence or an ethos that you start to feel. And yet at the same time, I knew there was tension. And so we did, Diesel and I worked together quite well and tried at one point to encourage the combining of the two English congregations, at least for a trial period. And that didn't work out the way we had hoped. Part of it was our preparation for it wasn't as good as it could have been, and there were other factors, but even so, yeah, I don't know. It's looking back. It's always more difficult when you're looking back, because it's easy to put on the rosy glasses when you look back and say,
Yeah.
Some of those things weren't so hard. I remember that being overwhelmed by the learning curve of being senior pastor to this. And I think the one thing that I really felt was needed was some tightening up of relationships between the three congregations. And that was one thing I really worked hard. I tried to preach somewhat regularly at all three services, to have that interaction with the Cantonese service as well, Cantonese people as well, its service as well as the English ones. And really to change the way people talked about the young English and the old English, because I heard a story someone was telling me that an usher, when a new person came to church one Sunday morning and was greeted by an usher, and somehow the knowledge that there were two services, the 10 o'clock and the 11:20 was made known, and the usher said something to the person on the order of, well, you'll probably like it better here because it's the older congregation. The one across the street is younger people, kind of. I don't remember what the exact wording was.
Mm-hmm.
When I had the conversation with the deacons, I said, I'm going to tell you something. If I was a new person coming to this church for the first time and was choosing which congregation to worship with, I said, I would be over at the Y worshiping with the 10 o'clock English. And it's got nothing to do with the fact that I do or do not have gray hair on my head. Because somehow gray hair came into that whole conversation that the usher had with this person. And I'm like,
interesting.
I couldn't believe that conversation ever took place. You're telling a person to go to a particular service because of the gray in their hair? Give me a break. So, that was one of those funny, you got to be kidding me moments, where you go, okay. This too shall pass.
There's actually a question from the crowd from
yes.
They asked, I have a question for Pastor Linda. What are some examples of theological differences you noticed during your time at FCBC?
Okay, I really dislike using these kinds of labels, but that's the easiest way I know how. The 11:20 English service leaned toward a more liberal understanding of the gospel regarding all kinds of different issues, homosexuality, women in ministry. It was kind of the conservative versus the liberal versus the progressive and all of those kinds of things in between. I felt very strongly that the Cantonese service and the 10 o'clock English service were a lot more similar in their kind of basic, the way they approach scripture in terms of all kinds of different social issues and things like that. I don't, the labels are so hard, but sort of a conservative liberal kind of divide that happens.
No, that's tough. I know, like you can't just label it. It's so easy to just use those two labels, but it's like, it's such a spectrum, right?
Yeah, it makes it sound like it's this and this when it's not. There's a whole lot of in the middle.
Right.
But I don't even know if I should. Is this group pretty good about being confidential? There's one example I can give you that
I was gonna say these are a group of kids that are in high school, which it's kind of notorious with gossip, but I'm pretty sure they won't gossip about. They're
okay,
not talking to other church people about this stuff.
without telling you where I land on this issue, because it's beside the point. The differences struck me one day, and now these were people from the same congregation, mind you. It's after the election. I'm in my office, and one person from the 1120 congregation walks in and literally almost pulling their hair out. I can't believe he was elected. I can't stand this. How can we have a president like that? Just totally destroyed by the fact that Trump was elected president. So I go upstairs for breakfast, and somebody up there comes up to me and says, yeah, well, now she'll go to jail, won't she? And I'm like, I'm going back to my office. But that's just one little story. And this is in the same congregation. This isn't even 10 and 1120. This is in one congregation, having those two widely divergent reactions to the last election. And that is the story within all, at least within the two English congregations and somewhat in the Cantonese speaking congregation. And so when I use conservative liberal, it's
complicated.
It's more complicated than that. Yeah. But that's one of those, my dad would call that one of those funny, not funny ha-ha, but funny shush kind of moments. Like, oh, you don't know whether to laugh or cry, so you probably do both, which is kind of how I felt that day. It was like, how do you help people mend a divide like that within this one part of the congregation? And then you have similar things going on in the other English congregation. And yeah.
I guess that's like the benefit of being the senior pastor. You get to hear all the craziness that's going on.
That's everywhere. The bonus. Yeah, that's the bonus.
You get all the juicy stories. Yeah. Well, I mean, I remember, I think when I think back on just your time with us, and I know when we talked, I could tell that was just such a big focus of you trying to bridge the gaps and the divides between the congregations and really addressing that issue of are we three churches under one roof, or are we actually one church? And I remember one thing that was that you did, and I felt like it was such a cultural shift and something that was super encouraging to me, was when you had a prayer day. I don't know if you remember that, but I remember you just had a day where you invited everyone from all the congregations to come, and it was on a Saturday. And we had people from the Chinese congregation, from the Old English, the New Young English, and I thought that was just just great. It was just so and I felt like that day, we mixed it up with groups, and I felt like we were closer. Can you guys? Okay, sorry, I know I blanked out there. I thought that day was just a really good step towards unity, and it wasn't.
That was a breakthrough day, yeah.
Yeah, it was such a it wasn't, it's not a membership meeting, it's not another meeting, but it was let's just come and pray. There's no there's nothing to do, but to just to be together and go to God together, and to see faces, and I thought that was just great, and I saw that. I think that your focus on prayer was something I really picked up on in your time here with us. It was just you just I felt like the things you do is let's make sure we pray first before we do anything. And there's a lot of work to be done, but let's pray together. And I remember I love that.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I remember that day very well. It was, I think it was a breakthrough day in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, it was just so cool, like to hear people. I mean, I think there's prayers happening when I remember in my small group when we did like breakout groups. There were people praying in Chinese,
Hmm.
and we could talk, and there was some translation going on. But when it was like their turn to pray, they just went in Chinese, and then it was just awesome because we knew like, we're praying the same God, and
Hmm.
we're praying over the same things.
Yeah.
And so it's that, that universal language of love that was happening. And so um yeah, hopefully we can get more of that. I think you're on to something there.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, when churches are going through those phases where they don't have a senior pastor, or they're just in transition, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of arguments and stuff. And you just forget to go back to the basics and to really pray as a people and as a church. And so I think I remember that day too, and I just remember how healing it was for many people. So yeah, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
And I mean, I think we have some questions coming in, and so if you have any questions for Pastor Linda, feel free to throw them in chat, and we'll try to like address them and bring them to Linda. I'm sure she would love to answer them. So
I have one here from Perfect Love 33 that says, how can we bridge the gap between us being a multi-generational and multicultural church?
Yes, how can we?
What can you define the gap? I mean, what gap are we talking about?
I assume he probably means like the differences in who we are as people.
Okay, so are we talking more about the generational?
I think it's encompassing all of it. The Chinese and the non-Cantonese speaking, and also just all the gaps.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we've just hit on, I mean, you just talked about the most important one, and that's prayer. You can find unity in prayer when you can find it nowhere else. And so that's a huge one. I think one of the multi-generational piece, I think, is a matter of finding ways that the two, three, four, five, I mean, you're talking at First Chinese, you're probably talking a minimum of 4 generations, maybe 5.
Yeah.
Okay. So
yeah, I mean, you think about all like the fellowship groups, right? And you can tell like the Semenons experience of church and of the Asheras and then the Explorers. I mean, everyone's got their like when they grew up, what their image of churches is got to be different.
And now you have younger people who are growing up within a different image than all of them.
Right.
So some of those things we may never be able to bridge, but I think getting to know each other on the personal level. So let's say, for instance, we were talking about one of my classes that I'm taking. We were talking about how could we, as pastoral leaders, as leaders in the church, help our older senior population, many of whom are, know little or no technology, they have no access to it, they don't understand it. How could we help them become more technologically adept? So we brainstormed this idea of, outfitting some of our young adults and our senior high students, outfit them with, all the personal protective equipment, send them over to a senior's house with an iPad and with an iPhone, and teach them how to use the technology. And in the process of that, you have
like IT ministry.
What's that?
Do you have like this IT ministry?
Yeah. And
awesome.
Somebody, of course, had to call it the Geek Patrol, and I said,
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like
that's my age,
genius bar going on.
But I think if we can find ways to do that, where we can make opportunities for the generations to actually have conversations with each other. Right now, what we're doing during our after worship fellowship time is that one of our members is interviewing different people. So we interviewed one of our oldest couples. And now this next week, he's interviewing one of our immigrant families. And so we're learning, the congregation is learning about each other. They're learning things. They've been worshiping together for 10 years or more, in some cases 20, 30 years. And they're learning more about each other in these little conversations after worship on Zoom than they've ever had face to face.
That's great.
So if we can keep finding ways to interact like that in mutually respectful, mutually helpful ways, I think we can overcome a lot of the multicultural, the multi-generational. Now, when you're talking two different languages, it gets a lot more difficult, because I never knew, when I was preaching at the Cantonese service, I had no idea if it was being translated properly, the way I was saying it. It was being, I mean, Wendy always told me it wasn't. So, but she would say to me, well, I don't think they understood what you meant when. And that's a way to approach that language difference, is that if something I say is being translated, it may not translate the way I mean it.
Right.
And so having someone like Wendy, who was really, bilingual, trilingual actually, but anyway, who could help me understand that. And it always was from the perspective of, I'm not sure they understood what you meant. Can you explain this word or this phrase? And that kind of mutual respect goes a long ways. So that's a long answer.
It's having those interactions together, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have to kind of get over almost like the fear of like the unknown, right? Or the fear of like, approaching people that we're not familiar with or that we don't know. So I really love those opportunities when the two groups, like the multi-generational groups, can come together, have lunch. I know we did it a couple times as a church, and hoping that would be something that we would continue to do in the future.
Yeah, that brown bag lunch idea of, having a question on each table for the people to talk about. I mean, that was a brilliant idea.
So great.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, you kind of touched on, a little bit about maybe our last topic, which is something that you've been learning recently, this new church movement.
Fresh expression.
Fresh expression. I was trying to figure out, I forgot the name slipped in mind, but hold that. We're going to talk about that, but we're going to do a quick Kahoot. Do you know what a Kahoot is?
No.
It's just an online survey response game. So this is something we've been doing kind of in the middle of our portion of our interviews, just to have a little fun. So if one of our producers can share their screen and throw that up, and you feel free to join us. So if you're in the audience,
I know all the answers.
You might know all the answers. Well, actually, so you'll know at the end, there's the Linda trivia portion. I hope that you know all the answers. There's in the beginning, it's going to be heavy on the seminary trivia. And I also hope you know all the answers, but if you don't, it's okay, because, we all forget what we learned at school.
This is generally used as like an educational tool. You have students and phone, and then you can see like the results and everything.
So if you're in the audience, go on to just follow the directions on the screen. Join at www.kahoot.it, or get the Kahoot app, and the pin is 595-1125. So we're gonna give the audience a few seconds, maybe a minute to join in, and we had a little fun.
Okay, so I'll be able to see it even if I don't go to the website?
Yeah, you can just, you'll be with us, and we'll just kind of have fun on the screen. But they'll do it on their mobile devices or maybe another window. We have Jackie. Do you feel, Linda, like
There we go.
you remember how much of the information from a seminary do you feel like you retained, percentage-wise? Obviously, you remembered all important stuff, clearly.
Oh gosh, it's really hard to put a percentage on it, but
Did you enjoy? Oh, well, maybe a more important question, or better question would be, how was your seminary experience?
mostly I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Well, as an adult learner, you have a different approach, I think, to learning.
Right.
You're an adult, and I had a specific goal in mind, and I knew exactly what I needed to do to get there.
That helps.
Well, kind of. Some days more so than others, but my years in seminary, I would say somewhere between 50 and probably 75%. I may not remember exactly what I was taught, but I remember the process of getting there, or remember the results of learning it, or there are a lot of factual things, of course, that I do still remember, but probably because I've done a lot of studying afterwards on those same kinds of subjects, like obviously the Bible and preaching and theology and things like that. But overall, I almost said how many years. I'm not going to say that. I was going to say overall.
Of all the things that you've shared with us, I think that's the least embarrassing.
All those years I was in college and seminary. My seminary, I really feel like I received a good education. I learned how to think more broadly. I learned some really good ethical stuff, sometimes by the ethics that were practiced in front of me, and sometimes by learning what not to do. I don't want to be like that. But yeah, it was, in retrospect, it was a good experience. I don't regret it at all. I don't regret the time at all. And I would have never gotten to the Philippines. I went to China 3 times.
Wow.
I spent 3 months in Romania. I mean, I grew up in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, a town of like 7,000 people in the middle of northern Wisconsin that, how did this happen? Only God could have figured out a trajectory like that.
Definitely.
And now I'm on the West Coast.
Well, let me, can I also ask you, what was maybe one of the most important things that you learned in seminary? And then maybe the follow-up question would be also, what's something that you feel like you weren't prepared for when you jumped into being a pastor that seminary didn't prepare you for, that you had to learn outside of seminary? Yeah.
Some of the best things I learned in seminary, I took a lot of mission-related classes, multicultural. I grew up in an area that's 98.5% European American. White faces everywhere you look. And again, God wired me in a way that when I got into a more diverse population, I felt like I had come home. And working in the cities and everything. So I think the broadening of my worldview is probably the most influential thing that college and seminary gave me. It broadened my worldview in ways that I would have never experienced otherwise. And there's a lot about regular, honest to goodness, on the ground church life that you don't hear about in seminary. they never teach you how to, live through a deacon meeting. They don't
Maybe they
teach you,
should.
they don't teach you about, oh yeah, you could have people on the theological spectrum from A to Z, and you have to figure out how to
Push them
navigate all of it.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks. We can probably start our Kahoot.
What happened? There's a couple people who left, but I guess that
maybe we took too long.
Either we took too long, or the thing that's happened to me before when like these things is like your phone falls asleep and you need to turn it back on and log it back in.
If your phone is asleep, refresh or turn it back on and refresh. All right. Oop.
All right, here we go. Let's see if we can, if you remember this is all gonna be biblical knowledge. Which book contains the word Jacob I have loved, but Esau I have hated, or I hated? Do you know this answer? There's no shame if you forget.
No, I know it.
Oh, you know it. I was like, oh
yeah. I can't click on it, but
you can't.
They made the time limit pretty long.
Yeah, they did.
I think we're trying to like compensate for the lag.
Oh, I see.
Then so we give people a little more time. But Rick, do you know the answer?
I think so.
What's your guess? You can guess. I assume.
Give it away.
That doesn't mean that you're right. If Linda says it, it's probably right.
Actually, I don't know now that I think about it.
I did not get this. I'll tell you.
Oh, then I'm probably wrong.
I won't say anymore, but what do you think it is? Let's see. We'll find out in 27 seconds, but
you're right.
You think it's what?
I thought it was Genesis.
It is not. It's Romans. Is that what you thought?
Oh my gosh, that's right.
I thought Genesis too. You think like, oh, it's Esau, Jacob is in the beginning. No, it's in Romans and.
Who's the really smart one who knew that?
I know, who is that? Clueless. Clearly not.
Wow, I better go back to seminary. No.
Refresher. So that was from Romans 9:13. Actually, there's actually two places. Romans 9:13, and I don't know the real answer. I had to look it up, but Romans 9:13 is actually referencing Malachi, another scripture verse. When it says "just as it is written," is in reference to Malachi.
Yeah. See, I jumped to the story and you didn't even think about the rest of it.
Let's see if
Oh,
yes.
the Book of Revelation.
Let's see if you know this one. The Book of Revelation.
Oh yeah, that one I know.
I know this. Yes.
Obviously.
Ooh,
Who do you think it is, Rick?
I don't want to say. There's way too much time up there.
Yeah, there's 72 seconds yet.
There's only 4 people. One more answer, and they're locked in. They can't change it. I don't think you can change your answer, right? Once you put it in.
No, you cannot.
All right. No.
So what's some of your favorite memories of FCBC? That's Linda.
FCBC? Okay. This is really food.
Nice. Like restaurants
good.
Or like
good, real homemade Chinese food. Yes. And then all those I mean, where else could I have learned about Chasu Bao? I mean, come on.
So the Book of Revelation was written by John.
Yeah,
good job, everyone.
Everybody is smart.
Good job, Mary Beth. Hey, wow, y'all know. I hope y'all not cheating. I trust you guys. There's so much time that you can look it up.
Well,
And obviously from Revelations 1 tells us the revelation from Jesus Christ, which God gave to him, show his servants whom as soon as released, made it known by sending his angel to his servant John on the island of Patmos.
In the year.
In which book is the story of Balaam's? Is it Balaam? Am I saying it right?
Balaam.
Is that the
Just
one that talks?
It's the talking donkey, yes.
Yeah, say it with authority.
That's the one that talks.
Whichever way you pronounce it, say it with authority.
And this I did not know. Do you know this one? Pastor?
Yeah.
Like I know the story, I just don't know.
Which one it's
I did not know the book. Yeah, that I knew. Like at least one of them I knew is not.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's not that one.
Rick, do you know?
I'd be surprised if
I
that one.
I'm debating between one or two. I put that. I was gonna pick Numbers.
So it was Numbers. Boom. Good job, Mary Beth. Climbing up. All right. These are all very hard questions, by the way. The Numbers, yeah, there you go. It's from the book of Numbers. This is all taken from like I found these on the Trinity Seminary College website or something like that. It was actually really weird. It was like a poll, it was like these all these trivia questions. I was like, oh, let me answer them, and I wanted to find out the answer, and it's like asking for your email, and like it was almost like like you were registering for college if you wanted to find out the answers. So basically, I had to look up individually with Google all these answers.
Well, most of those I could have answered back in seminary because we did a book and studied the whole thing for a quarter.
All right, well, here's a little softball for you.
Oh yeah, that's softball.
Jesus was born in, is it Galilee, Nazareth, Bethlehem, or Jerusalem? If you know your Christmas songs, you probably have this in the bag.
Man, Joseph and Mary are pretty young in that picture.
Yeah, they sure are.
It's olden times, right? You know, they got married a lot younger, and you know, she was a virgin, so
they are not teenagers.
he's got a full-on beard. What do you miss the most right now with the quarantine? Besides people.
Yeah, well, yeah, that one I think is true, probably true for all of us except the true introvert. Well, I miss being able to run into San Francisco, out to the beach, out to the ocean. Doing those kinds of outings, getting out to Redwood Glen, stuff like that.
I see. I was trying to find a photo of you to put on our Instagram page to kind of promote our interview, and I came across just like randomly. I tried to like look up on Facebook, and there was one that Nelson had put up when they ran into you at Redwood Glen.
Oh yeah.
And you were New Life with New Life.
Oh really? Wow.
Yeah. We were out there for our retreat, our congregational retreat. And they always do one day where they cook outside. So I'm standing in line, and I hear these voices behind me, and I turn around and it's Nelson, Johnny.
Is Johnny Uncle John Tom?
Yeah.
Okay.
John. Who else was there? Wyman.
Is that a men's retreat?
No, I think they're doing a service project or something.
Yeah, it was the men's service weekend or day or whatever they were doing. So it's like, oh my gosh,
That's awesome.
All right, next question. Which was a wife of David who complained about his dancing? I have no idea. I was wrong.
Oh, I know that one.
It's getting intense now.
I know what it's not.
I know who it is. Not this one.
Do you know this one, Linda?
I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's see if our audience knows. Let's see if who's number one. I think was it still Clueless?
Yeah. Were you able to? You've gone to youth camp.
Yes.
How many times have you been able to participate in youth camp?
Twice.
Twice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one other time when I was out at Redwood Glen for something, see, 3 people knew that one.
Cal?
Did
Michael.
you? Was that who you thought it was?
Mhm.
I
I knew
did
it
not.
started with an M. I just couldn't remember the whole name.
Clueless.
Ooh, Clueless is right up there on top. Woohoo, good job.
Not living up to the name. Okay. There it is in 2 Samuel. As the ark of the Lord came to the city of David, Michal, I'll say with authority, the daughter of Saul looked out the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord. And she despised him in her heart.
Because of the dancing, or who knows?
Well, he
Yeah,
wasn't
it's 'cause-
acting like a king. He was
acting
acting
like a fool.
rabble.
Oh. Amos is from.
Do you know this?
I know that one.
This one I got right. Not because I knew the answer, but because of like those tips you learn when you're taking like multiple choice tests.
Yep. Yeah, and this one you could pretty much do a process of elimination.
What were your impressions of youth camp? What did you like about it? Or
I like the energy. That's why I love hanging around with, with the youth groups, because there's an energy that we lose as we get older. I don't know what happens to it. It just kind of goes away somewhere. So for me, it's like, it's energizing. I love the energy and the enthusiasm. Yeah.
All right, and the answer is, I know that one.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Woohoo.
There you go.
where is Tekoa? Like what is that?
I'd have to look at the map.
From
Israel,
it's next to Bethlehem from my research.
Okay. So
It's next to Bethlehem, really close.
Is it still called Tekoa?
I don't know.
The phrase "the vanity of vanities."
Do you know this, Linda?
Oh, I think I know. I mean, it just
Do you
sounds.
really?
It sounds like the book.
Yeah.
No. Or am I wrong?
I got this wrong.
I'm pretty sure just with the phrase, like it sounds like where it comes from. But
I just know it was like the one book I know it was not from, but I got this one wrong.
okay.
I didn't even
Happens to the
recognize
best
this
of
line.
us.
I did not recognize this phrase.
Well, sometimes it depends on the version you're reading too.
It's true. No, yeah, I did find a different version.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is taken from the NIV. That's how y'all get that.
It sounds like it's written from that book.
Don't know what it means, but y'all are impressive. Jackie's running up.
Ooh, Jackie's adding.
Next question. Oh, this is the verse. There you go. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. Ecclesiastes 1. What's the word? What does the word homiletics mean?
Study. I don't know.
This I had no idea.
That's something to do with
I'm pretty sure you do, Linda, right?
Well,
Still remember this?
I'm laughing because it's like, oh yeah, there's
I think I know. I think I might know.
There's homiletics, and then there's the what's the other one? There's another word that's this long that
Similar.
I shake my head and go, ah. I'm pretty sure I remember this one.
This one I did not know. Have you ever been from all the other with all the other churches that you've been involved with? Do they have something like youth camp that you've been part of?
Not the kind of youth camp that First Chinese has. They were more like vacation Bible school kinds of formats, more than actual youth camp.
I see. So yeah, homiletics, the art of preaching or writing sermons. That's homiletics.
I did get that right, but because of the word homilies. But I actually What's the difference between like a homily and a sermon?
The length.
Oh,
Seriously, a homily.
that's short.
A homily in the the Catholic or Episcopal Church is 6 to 8 minutes.
Oh, okay. I see. So how long is a sermon supposed to be?
Nowadays, anywhere from 20 to 45, depending on the church and the preacher and whether you're on Zoom or not.
Well, the next question is, whose servant was Gehazi? I don't know if I'm saying it right.
So who serves Gehazi, or does who does Gehazi serve?
Who does he serve?
Yeah.
Who does Gehazi serve?
Yes.
Who was his master?
Yeah, who was the master?
I know this one.
I did not.
I know who it's not, I think. Actually, I don't know, but
I did not.
I don't think Daniel has servants, does he?
Two of them are pretty easy to eliminate.
He was Elisha? Was that who you thought, Rick?
No.
Ooh, KNT climbing up. Jackie, what's going on? Falling. All right. Next question. Oh no, there's a verse right there from 2 Kings, chapter 5, verse 20. Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself. That is where that's from. This was a pretty easy one, I think. Paul encountered Christ on the road to that famous road, not Romans Road.
Now, there's another answer that would have been more of a red herring than any of these,
Oh,
but you didn't create the question.
I did not create that.
So you don't have to,
Have you ever gone to the Holy Land, Pastor Linda?
I have not. I have wanted to. There was a couple of times I got really close to being able to go, and then something would happen and I wouldn't be able to go. And I figured, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. And now it's getting so expensive. I actually just looked at a trip and it's like $5,500. And I'm going, not on a pastor's salary.
Well, I bet traveling is quite cheap nowadays, right now.
Right at this moment, yeah. Oh my gosh, yeah, it was like $114 to go to Hawaii. And I'm thinking, I want to go.
I remember really wanting you to come with us on to Thailand.
I know, that was my other one I really wanted to do was Thailand.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
That would have been really fun to do that.
That would have been amazing.
Well, and you're right. For you guys, Damascus is the Damascus Road. What was the red herring that you're talking about?
Emmaus.
Emmaus?
The road to Emmaus is for many people a more familiar story. It's after the resurrection when the two disciples are walking back to their home and Jesus joins them and they don't know who he is.
Is that referenced in the Bible?
Oh yeah, it's in Acts.
Okay. Good to know. Next question. Oh no, there's an Acts 9:5 as he neared Damascus journey. Suddenly the light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice saying,
you could write the people who did that and say they called Paul instead of Saul when it's at this point in time it was actually Saul.
That's true.
You could get him on that.
That's true. The suffering servant prophecy is in which major book?
I know that one.
I feel like that's
the suffering servant prophecy. Oh.
I don't remember the book, but I remember that recently came across what this whole prophecy.
How many times do you think you've read the Bible?
Cover to cover? Okay, I'll be honest, I have read the New Testament way more often than I have read the Old.
I'm sure that's common.
Cover to cover 2 or 3 times. But I've probably read each book multiple times, but not necessarily, from front to back.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
And it was Isaiah.
Yep, that's who it was.
What's your favorite book?
Oh, welcome back, Jackie. Tag on. Still clueless is on this crazy streak. Getting kind of suspicious now, but Isaiah 53. There you go. He was despised and rejected by mankind, a man of suffering, familiar with pain. Before defeating the Midianites, God whittled down whose army to 300? Was it Gideon's, Samson's, Deborah's, or Leonidas?
I know this one.
I know this one.
It's one of my favorite stories.
I know this one.
Dun, dun, dun. It's one of my favorite versions of the Bible. No, it's not. It's not really, but.
Do you have a favorite book of the Bible, Pastor Linda?
I do kind of, well, the Psalms. I mean, everybody loves the Psalms. I really do like the book of Isaiah. But I also like, I love some of the Old Testament books. I love Amos. I think my favorite gospel is Mark, because it's fast moving and everything happens immediately.
Yeah.
I love that. I like Ephesians. I like Galatians. But yeah, I would say my top is probably Psalms and Isaiah.
So the answer was Gideon.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when you dreamed that the bread would tumble down and destroy the camp, like a big loaf of bread would roll down a hill?
I don't know. It was from Judges 7. Lord said to Gideon, you have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into your hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me. Next question. Which biblical character was a Tishbite?
Was
I'm saying that.
Oh, I see.
I did not even know what this meant. I had to look it up. Do you know this answer?
Wait, does that mean they're not like an Israelite? Or is it like a region?
No, I don't want to give it away. Lynn, do you have a favorite translation of the Bible?
Ooh, that's a good question.
For an older version, I like the New Revised Standard. And I like the Contemporary English. And I like I'm looking at the 6 Bibles sitting on my counter. One of the things I absolutely love to do when I'm preparing a sermon or studying a passage is I will look it up in as many different versions of the Bible as I can get my hands on. And I use study Bibles, and I use just Bibles with nothing, no footnotes or anything. And I love to get all kinds of different versions, but my go-to is usually the New Revised, and if not that, then I'm doing the Contemporary English.
Ooh, Haley. I'm assuming that's Haley. Oh, hey.
And
so
I
I
like the message too, but it's one of those that's a little more difficult sometimes to. It's not as contemporary as it was when it was written, because some of the references are.
Yeah, it's like it is not as contemporary.
Kind of goofy now,
Yeah, it's very time stamped.
Yeah, but there's some really good stuff in there too. So
yeah,
that's why I read so many different ones.
So yeah, Tishbite is as I've learned, is like from a certain group of people from a certain region. So like San Franciscan, I guess, would be kind of like something like that. Multi. Oh, here we're in the Linda trivia section. I hope you know the answer, Linda. Linda's favorite food is what? And we have our famous answer reveal. If you wait too long.
Naga pork.
Or is it a red herring? Ooh.
No, it's my second. There are more than one answer, yeah.
Oh, there's more. Oh,
There is more than one answer. There's actually more than one answer.
Because I couldn't decide between the two.
if the answer is Naga pork, I want you to explain what that is. I've never heard of that before.
Could be just an answer I made up to throw people off because it sounds different.
Is there a restaurant that you really liked in San Francisco?
Actually my favorite restaurant is in Alameda. It's a Mideastern, a halal
Oh,
restaurant, and I always go in and have their gyro,
oh, nice.
the shawarma gyro.
Oh, I
Yeah,
haven't had one of those in a while.
they have the clay pot behind there that they're cooking stuff on, and the stew go in, and
So it is Naga pork.
So yeah, it's Naga pork and walnut shrimp, and yeah, I mean, tell us about Naga pork.
Naga pork. Some of the members at New Life are from Nagaland, which is in northern India.
Really?
And Naga pork is a very spicy pork and garlic and potato, depending on who's making it. Some different kinds of vegetables will be in it, but it's it's really spicy, and I love it. I like spicy food, so which makes the walnut shrimp a little bit of an anomaly, but I like those too. And there's a place here in town that does really good walnut shrimp.
Oh, I thought you were about to say Naga pork. I was like,
Naga pork.
No, that comes straight from the families.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there's any Nagaland.
You should tell them to open a restaurant. There's gonna be no competition. The corner of that market. All right, Linda's favorite movie is it Palms, Sister Act, Coco, or Joy Luck Club?
Those are good, those are pretty good choices that you made there for answers.
I know, right? I had to
any number of them could fit.
I'm not sure what Palms is.
Well, see, there you go.
It's a good one. It's an amazing movie. I can't believe you've never seen it.
Wait, really? Is it stamp or something?
I don't know. It's the name of the movie. It does, but if you know what it.
Oh, no one got it. We got him. It tricked them.
Palms is about.
I had to look it up. I've never seen Palms.
These elderly women who become cheerleaders. That's the Palms.
It's Pom-Poms.
It is. It's funny. It's a little bit of a tearjerker.
It's starring Diane Lane, right?
Yeah, I love the fact that here's all these older women that are being represented as whole people. And just because they're old doesn't mean they've given up all their dreams. And that, I'm at an age where I need that kind of reminder.
Sister Act's kind of like that.
Oh yeah, I love Sister Act too. And Sister Act 2 and Sister Act.
All right, next, Linda. Linda's home state is, if you're paying attention to the interview, you have known she's dropped the hint multiple times already. I try not to pay. I didn't try to like target that in that part.
So
I've actually lived in 3 of those states.
Oh, that. Originally, when you first came to us, your accent totally reminded me of the movie Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
We
are far enough north that yes.
Or the mom from Bobby's World, remember? I
barely. How many people know that reference?
I actually don't know.
Put that in the chat if you know that Bobby's mom reference from Fox Kids.
I've actually lost a little. I lose some of it when I'm back out here for a while, but then I go back to the Midwest and I'm there for 10 days, and I come back and all of a sudden I'm hearing a boat. I get that OU going. I get that OU going again, and.
Where does that come from? Like, which is that is it just Midwest, or is it like a specific?
It must be Midwest, because you hear it You hear it in northern Minnesota, you hear it in northern Wisconsin. As you move into Canada, you hear it even stronger. My family immigrated, my dad's side of the family immigrated from France through Canada.
Good job, guys.
And I think a lot of people probably in northern Minnesota and Wisconsin, that was true.
Very good. It was Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And Wisconsin, speaking of Wisconsin, what's their state mascot? As a generic mascot, which throw up there. Is it the Badger, the Bulldog, the Tiger, or the Red Hawk?
Pretty sure it's not the Tiger. Really funny if it was.
I should have given you my hometown mascot. Nobody did. Well, yeah, you maybe you'd have gotten it because it's so weird.
Wait, what's your hometown?
Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
Rhinelander?
Yep, the Hodag.
What is that?
It's actually it was a hoax that a guy pulled off in the 1800s or late 1800s. He built this like wood and kind of like a paper mache animal that looked like a dinosaur with horns and
so it's like a imaginary thing.
Yeah, with this big mouth with big teeth and red eyes, and the story goes that it would only eat white bulldogs. And I mean, it was, and the guy set it up in a pit, and he charged people money to see it.
That's funny.
It's a hysterical story.
That'd be a pretty cool mascot.
Yeah.
Our Wisconsin state mascot is.
Well, if anybody watches sports, they probably.
Yeah, this one's easy because I follow basketball.
Oh, actually, I don't know.
They got a pretty good basketball team. Is the Badgers.
There you go.
That's right. Oh, no movement there. And the last one, Linda's Dream.
Nobody's going to get this one.
What is it? Is it go skydiving in New Zealand, underwater diving in the Maldives, buy Harley and go on the road, or watching the Northern Lights in Finland?
Ooh, I kind of like all of those, Aaron. Let's go do them.
I know. Let's do it. This is all over. Get some Naga pork on the way too.
There we go. Yeah, we could go via India, northern India.
Ooh, I would love to go to India. I really want to go.
Do you get to travel internationally very much?
Not anymore. There's this thing about having to work for a living.
Yeah, that's true.
Paying off that student loan, which I figure I'm probably going to die before I get it paid off. So,
Maybe you can find an interim position in the Maldives.
Yeah, well, I was aiming for Hawaii. There's a couple of American Baptist churches over there.
I know, I heard.
I kind of would like to encourage.
Wow.
There you go.
It
There's a
is
couple
by
people who
Harley.
tell this story.
Oh, really?
I have gone skydiving. I did that on my 60th birthday.
Wait, so do you know how to drive a motorcycle?
No, I've never learned. It's on my to-do list.
Okay.
I started learning how when I was like in high school, but some things got in the way.
They always do.
Great job, Clueless. Not so
Yeah, Clueless.
Oh, hey, coming second. KNT.
Those are all pretty good. Look at that.
All right, well, thank you for playing. And I think we have one more question for you. I know you kind of brought this up. This new church movement, I think that you've been kind of been learning about. What was the term? I lost it.
Fresh expressions.
Fresh expressions.
Actually, it's been around longer than I realized. It started in the UK, in the United Kingdom, and they've been around about 10 years. It just recently, within the last couple of years, sort of crossed the ocean and came to the US. What's interesting is it's really nothing new, because in one sense, it's talking about the church is more than just the building, getting outside the walls.
Right.
dinner church, things like that.
Mhm.
What I like about this particular movement is that they also have a very high regard for what they call the historical church, the traditional church. One of their bylines about it is deep roots, which is your traditional church, and wild branches, and that there's room and need for both. Because if we lose the traditional or the inherited church, we lose all this wisdom and knowledge that has been gained over the years. But if we don't have the wild branches, then we're going to stagnate and not grow. We're going to die. And so they talk a lot about, well, I'm taking 3 classes right now through Fresh Expressions Academy. Innovation, which is about creative thinking and design thinking, and how do we get, how you get yourself to think beyond the boxes we tend to put ourselves and our churches in. Well, I'm doing a preaching class because I like preaching and I like learning new ways. And I'm learning about what they call dialogical preaching, which is more of having a conversation with the congregation rather than being a talking head. And I love that idea. I mean, audience participation in a sense, And then the other one I'm taking is called Navigating Change. And that's a lot. It's really, in some ways, it's a refresher course because navigating change is basically what my job is, helping people navigate change. But this is giving me some new dimensions on it. And my next round of classes with them, I'm going to be taking one on their home church movement, their dinner church, and I can't remember the third one. But anyway, the Fresh Expressions, the idea is that you go to where people are. This is not a new idea.
Yeah.
So they have Fresh Expressions that are popping up in dog parks, in pubs, in yoga classes, anywhere where people gather, where there's an opportunity to have conversation and build relationships. So it's not a new idea. The piece that intrigues me is this idea of inherited church and the Fresh Expressions, the wild branches. And so, and again, I mean, a lot of it's coming from a younger group of people than me. I'm in my 60s now, and to be interacting with church leaders that are in their 30s and 40s, and there's this level of excitement, and there's this level of willingness to think differently and to be outside the box. And I mean, look at where we are. The church has been pushed outside the building. So we didn't stop having church. We just stopped gathering in one place. And I'm sure that's as true of First Chinese as it is of New Life. A lot of the ministries continued. People are doing things, they hear that someone needs groceries, they go buy groceries and they drop them off. Those kinds of things didn't stop happening. That's what being the church is.
Right.
And so I could go on and on about this, but anyways, I'll keep it. Well, I was still in Medford almost 2 years ago. I've been following Fresh Expressions for probably 2.5 years. And while I was still in Medford, I kept thinking, this idea kept coming to me that somehow Fresh Expressions was this tool that God was giving me for New Life. Ever since I knew I was coming to New Life, I had this idea that somehow Fresh Expressions and New Life were going to come together. And COVID happened, and this happened. COVID happened. It's like, well, it wasn't the way I anticipated, but there's more of an openness now in people's minds to try new things because oh my gosh, we not only tried something new, we've been able to pull it off. So that some of that fear is gone.
All right.
And so my hope is now, instead of like being a rubber band and snapping back to where we were, that there'll be this forward movement in the church that continues that movement outside the building.
Yeah.
I'm just real. I mean, I paid money to go to school, I'm paying money.
Yeah. I mean, I really resonate with that. Like, I think, obviously, like, because of the circumstances of COVID-19, churches have kind of resorted to Zoom and other like virtual avenues of connecting. But I think, at least from my point of view, and I think a lot of people start seeing it, that there's been a lot of like benefits that have come out of it that we wouldn't have normally have gotten had it not we like been forced into that.
Right.
And it kind of has opened up like these opportunities, for people and for the church to see like we can connect with people in different ways. I imagine, a lot of churches, maybe even SCC included, never thought that we would ever, quote unquote, televise our, our services. But now you're able to like when I look at the participants on Zoom, is like, I don't remember ever seeing that many people in the congregation. And I think it allows, just like, especially when you think about people who get older and maybe cannot travel, or they're shut in for health reasons, or, for whatever life circumstances, you can't make it out that day. It's great that you can now like actively be there live with people. And this is kind of cool.
Yeah, I for New Life now, we have people from Nigeria, Ghana, and Canada joining us on Sunday mornings.
Wow.
That never happened, under normal circumstances, but, Zoom has opened that up for us. And I can't imagine that anybody's going to want to go back to being, well, unfortunately, yes, I can imagine it.
I mean, it doesn't, it's still not better than like being next to people.
But it's like, then it kind of comes into questions like, what does it mean to be a member of a church, right? Like membership, and is that needed, or are there going to be, rules on who can attend or who can do this? If I'm attending the church on Zoom, does that mean I'm a member or what?
See, in my mind, a member is someone who attends regularly. I don't. The rules about church happened because people got involved. Jesus had very few rules about what it looks like to be church, in terms of, his rules weren't the kind of rules that humans tend to come up with. I mean, yes, there needs to be some kind of organizing, structure. But I think when it comes to membership, sometimes I don't know. It seems like there should be a better way.
Jesus didn't have membership classes?
Basics?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's it. There's basics, but is it really okay, so here's the question. Is a membership class about being a Christian, or is it about being a member of a church?
Is that rhetorical? I'm not sure.
Well, that's,
Oh yeah, no, right? For some people, it's like, that's what that, like, it'd be, there's like, it's confusing.
Most churches have the two combined.
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
Definitely.
But you don't, I mean, that's presuming that everybody who wants to be a member has never been a Christian before.
Yeah.
That seems kind of presumptuous on my.
There are churches I know that, like, if you weren't baptized at their church, you need to get baptized again. Like, it didn't count.
Yeah. So there's those aspects.
All these,
most churches have baptism and membership tied together, right?
Right.
Where do you find that in the Bible?
Right. Yeah. You don't wait Easter and Christmas in the Bible. It just happens.
Now, in the early church, they did have like their baptism classes were like 3 years long. I mean, we're talking significant, teaching. But I mean, I've conducted baptisms that were totally unrelated to church membership.
Lately I've been having conversations like, it seems so weird that we would like, because a lot of our kids, a lot of myself included, came to accept Christ at youth camp. And it's like, it's just like, it's a little odd that it's like, sometimes when I think about like, oh, like, and then you have to wait, go through this process to get baptized. And it's like, when you look at the Bible, it's like, do you believe? All right, let's go find a body of water and like, let's go publicly declare it. And it's like, part of me understands that like there's the arguments for and against, and but I always thought it'd be really cool if we could just do baptisms at youth camp.
Well, and that's actually the very first baptisms I conducted were on a youth backpacking trip in a mountain lake.
Wow.
Where a couple of our youth had these amazing encounters with the Lord on that trip, and they wanted to be baptized. And the leadership on the trip said, you know what, let's do it.
Yes.
The youth pastor at the time, and I was licensed as a pastor, but he was technically the youth pastor. His philosophy always was that it was easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So
That's true. That's true.
Fortunately, nobody was upset with us, but
it's kind of hard to get upset for baptizing people.
Well, you would hope, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but this has been fun, you guys. Thank you for thinking of me.
No, thank you for joining us. It was so great to hear from you and to catch up and kind of fill in the gaps and kind of take a stroll down memory lane.
Yeah, no kidding, huh? Well, and hopefully I didn't bore the young people to death in the process.
Sure, you have not. It's really nice to know you're back in the Bay Area, and hopefully, when this is all over, we can grab a bite to eat or.
Let's get that Naga pork.
Oh.
I'll bring Naga pork. You bring your coffee.
Deal, easy.
I'll ask Jonathan or Tuya to make Naga pork.
Sounds good. All right. Well, I think that's all we have for tonight.
All right.
Thank you guys for joining us. We are going, if you were part of our youth program, we have a Zoom hangout afterwards. I forgot to ask you, Linda, but if you are still free, we would love to have you kind of just stop by. Maybe if you want to meet some of our youth, and if they have any questions, maybe they could answer. But if you can't, if you're I understand. Maybe you have things. I didn't bring this up to you earlier, but so if you can't stay, that's totally fine. But if you can, I think it'd be awesome for you to meet some of our kids before you head off. But this is the end of our Youth Talks interview. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Pastor.
God bless. Take care.